US President Joe Biden says America's commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. He made the comments in a message to Israeli President Isaac Herzog to mark Israel's 76th Independence Day. Mr. Biden described himself as a lifelong supporter of Israel and stated that he was the only American president to visit Israel in wartime. Well, for more on all those stories, I'm joined here in the studio by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. Let's start with the words of one Palestinian woman, perhaps speaking for many in Gaza, when she said, "We don't know where to go," as she tried to flee from the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. What's the picture that's emerging from there?
I mean, you are right, that is one person who's speaking for many. We've actually heard from some people who have had to evacuate 9 times. I mean, in the space of 7 months, 9 times these people are being forced from one place to another. They can't get enough food, they can't get enough water. We're hearing that people are having to walk kilometres just to get some water, and even then it's not enough for what they need. Again, a lack of food. UN agencies warning that famine is spreading. A lack of everything, a lack of medical supplies. We know today that MSF have been forced out of the Indonesian hospital in Rafah because of the Israeli airstrikes extremely nearby, so they've had to evacuate that for safety reasons. That of course leaves patients and other staff there without that support. I mean, it's hard to put it into words at this stage.
And the UN says 20% of the population of Gaza have fled in the past week alone, with Israel now apparently broadening its assault on the territory.
We've heard, I mean, as you said earlier, 100 airstrikes taking place today, and more since we wrote that script, frankly. These are continuing to take place. There is just no let up. Homes are being targeted, schools are being targeted, health facilities are being targeted. It's getting to the point there. I mean, 80% of healthcare facilities have closed. We know that the fighting is spreading. It's not just in Rafah and in the north, it is a number of places. We've heard from the Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas today, and they have been saying that they have destroyed an Israeli troop carrier in Rafah. That they killed some members of the Israeli military in that attack. They also say they blew up an Israeli military bulldozer east of Rafah, shelled a group of Israeli soldiers and military vehicles in Jabalia, and targeted an Israeli tank in Jabalia, as well as shooting and wounding an Israeli soldier with sniper fire in Jabalia. So that's from Hamas. And from Israel, I mean, we are here, you know, we know that they're carrying out, but they are not so detailed in the level of fighting information that they give us. But we know that these fights are taking place.
But that is what is so astonishing, Faith, because, I mean, it looks like Hamas has been able to rebuild its strength and repopulate its battalions. I mean, we're talking about this yesterday, in areas where they were earlier thought to have been cleared.
In areas that Israel said they had been cleared. Whether Hamas actually took that much of a hit, we'll never know. The concern is, and the Qatari Prime Minister voiced this very well today, he is warning of a growing radicalisation because, of course, if you are in an area that is being consistently bombed, consistently hit, consistently under a blockade, and let's not forget this didn't start in October, this, you know, Gaza has been under a blockade for a number of years. The airport has been destroyed, for instance. But the fear is that this war is going to lead to more radicalisation in Gaza in the medium term. That's the words of Qatar's Prime Minister. He says it's a real concern for the region because, of course, what they're looking for in the region is safety and security and stability. But actually, this war is going to bolster Hamas's ranks.
Well, I hope we'll return to what the Prime Minister of Qatar said a little bit later in this chat. But of course, with the IDF going back to try to deal with what is going on, I mean, that is bound to cause further destruction and is going to mean further upheaval for Palestinians who return to those areas believing that military operations had been concluded there.
I think people are just trying desperately to get to anywhere that might be safe. I'm not sure anyone believes that anywhere is safe anymore. We know there is now enough Israeli troops in Rafah to carry out a full-scale assault on the entire city. There is pockets of that assault happening in the east and in the west, but the US has said Israel now has enough troops amassed there that it's almost a matter of time for that city to be completely ground assaulted by the Israeli forces. So it is difficult to see where this goes. People flee. Some people can't flee. You know, we've heard from some people who are staying in Rafah because where else are they going to go? If they go to Jabalia, well, that's being assaulted. If they go to the Nusayrat refugee camp, well, that's being assaulted. Deir al-Balah, there's strikes. Khan Yunis, there's strikes. So some people are simply giving up and saying, we're not moving again, we're staying here.
Right. So I mean, how much does all this raise questions about whether Israel's strategy to drive out Hamas is actually sustainable in the long run?
We've actually been hearing a little bit more about Israel's strategy today from Ben-Gvir, who is one of the far-right ministers. There was also an Israeli march, again a far-right march. He is very clear. His wish is not simply to drive out Hamas, but to drive out every Palestinian from Gaza. He has said that today. What needs to happen now is that Israel goes into Gaza, Israelis resettle it, and Palestinians voluntarily leave. I think we can take the word voluntarily with a bit of a pinch of salt there. But Ben-Gvir, very outspoken on this matter today, saying that this is what they want to happen. He was speaking along with a number of other far-right ministers at an Israeli march where everyone there was calling for this to happen. So yes, while Netanyahu says he wants the end of Hamas, he's also very clear he does not want a two-state solution. He doesn't want anything. He doesn't want to hand the Palestinians anything, and neither do the rest of the Israeli government. So I think the international community are going to have a bit of a challenge on their hands here about how they deal with this and how this all comes to an end.
Well, it certainly sounds like it, and all these rather big issues being considered on the day that Israel is marking 76 years since the creation of the modern Jewish state.
Well, exactly. And with plans to expand that state. You know, we saw the Memorial Day yesterday as well, of course, where they paused and they remembered the fallen. And then we saw today marking Independence Day. I have seen quite a few comments internationally, certainly. Are you kidding? Like they're currently trying to wipe another country out of existence, and they're marking their own independence.
Well, that's what genocide is. I mean, you can't put it any other way. Although, to be fair, it's not the official position of the Israeli government, but it is the position of members of the Israeli government. Meanwhile, you talked earlier about the Prime Minister of Qatar. Qatar, of course, mediating between Hamas and Israel, saying that negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza have stalled. So does it look like there is no solution but war at the moment?
The Qatar Prime Minister, metaphorically, if not physically, seems to be banging his head against the wall at this point. He has said there's one party who wants to end the war and talk about the hostages. There's another party who wants the hostages and wants to continue the war. And as long as there's no commonality between those two things, it won't get us a result. Qatar is trying its best. It says it will continue to mediate. It will continue in that role. It is not going to accept pressure from outside to act in anything other than that. I mean, I'm sure if Qatar really wanted to, they could pressure Hamas a lot more than they are. They have been quite insistent that they're not going to do that. They're not going to be the one that applies the pressure. They're going to negotiate between the two sides. They're going to provide room for that to happen. It doesn't seem like there's an end. He did not seem particularly hopeful for an end to this war.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Faith Orr is Arise International correspondent.